Help! Actually, my parents. Yesterday, I was hit by a car driven by my MIL, Lorene, and was rushed to the hospital. After the surgery, while I was resting, my husband called me. After you were taken away yesterday, the police came, but I told them you got scared by the car and fell, and now today, Mom is saying she hit you. Summarizing my husband's excited rambling, it seems both my in-laws were taken to the police station. Indeed, yesterday, I was hit and injured by the car Lorene was driving. Yet, the person who drove, Lorene, and the passenger, my FIL Larry, had lied. They had conspired under my husband's instructions to make it seem like I had fallen and injured myself. I was dumbfounded and lost for words for a while. Hey! Are you listening? Anyway, you need to go and explain yourself that you just fell. These were the first words he spoke to me after I was rushed to the emergency. My anger reached its limit, and I decided to take revenge on my husband and in-laws. They must think I'll always do as they wish, but not anymore. That's when it hit me. Yes, this will surely prove that Lorene hit me. With my body still in pain, I reached for my smartphone again. My name is Alicia, 50 years old. Since getting married, I've been a housewife. I met my husband Colt in my 20s, in a typical office romance. He was assigned to take care of me when I joined as a new graduate. Even back then, my husband wasn't particularly handsome, nor did he have traits that were attractive to women. Of course, at that time, I didn't have any romantic feelings for him. I never once considered him in a romantic way, just diligently followed his orders every day. However, after working together for a while, he took a liking to me. He must have been happy to have a subordinate close in age, but gradually I realized it was more than that. Initially, I wasn't keen, but being flattered every day made me feel better. Thinking about it calmly, I don't know what he liked about me. But I got carried away by his sweet talk, and we ended up dating. Though we worked together for a while, about a year later, he proposed. I had no particular reason to refuse, so I accepted his proposal. Convincing myself that this was just how things are, I started a new life. Upon his insistence, I quit my job to become a housewife and, without any say, started living with his parents. I had visited my in-laws a few times after getting married, but never imagined I'd be living with them. When we met, they both welcomed me warmly, making me think there was nothing to worry about. By the time I realized, Larry had retired, and I was left alone with my in-laws while my husband was at work. There was hardly any sweet newlywed life from the marriage I had imagined. At first, they seemed somewhat considerate, but gradually their attitude towards me changed. Lorene's demands grew day by day, and the stress was crushing me. Because of Colt, you get to be a housewife, so you should at least be perfect at household chores, right? Every time something didn't please her, Lorene would scold me with delight. She never doubted that educating a bad daughter-in-law was her mission, as if it gave her life meaning. Lorene herself had lived with her mother-in-law. I remember when I got tired of hearing her old stories. Times and values have changed since then. Being forced to accept such mindsets was nothing but annoying. Yet, due to my position, I had no choice but to silently endure her nagging. Lorene would go out to karaoke with friends of her age a few times a week, and it seems they would enjoy talking badly about their daughters-in-law. Strangely, my daughter-in-law is so competent. Is not what they brag about, but rather, such a terrible daughter-in-law is what they take pride in discussing. Hearing such stories, I wondered if I would end up like them someday, which made me feel gloomy. As for Larry, he wasn't on my side either. Though he didn't antagonize me as much as Lorene, he complained about my cooking almost every day. Today's seasoning is especially strong. Are you serving such unhealthy food because you wish the elderly would just disappear? He feels like an outdated man from a bygone era, clearly looking down on women. He often says things like women should be a certain way, suggesting women need to be more considerate and help without being asked. It's embarrassing just listening to him, laying out his idealistic views, thinking he can remain the same and act all high and mighty no matter his age. Larry seems more about boasting his views to me rather than harassing me, proud of his own thoughts. He'll never realize his mistakes and will just grow older in this manner. Just like those unpleasant in-laws you see in dramas. I've talked to my husband about them numerous times, but he always gives vague responses. Moreover, as our marriage has progressed, he's begun to criticize me for speaking up. You should be kinder to dad and mom since they're old. Isn't that a wife's duty? Like father, like son. Following in his parents' footsteps, my husband has also started to take me for granted and look down on me. He does nothing to help around the house when he comes back, just sits there as if it's the norm. Having children might have changed things, but we were unable to have any. We tried fertility treatments until our late 30s, but it never happened. Right after we got married. When will I see my grandchild's face? Lorene would pressure me almost daily, asking. It's not solely my fault, and children are a blessing. Creating children just for the in-laws is absurd. I thought there was no need to force it, so I gave up when I turned 40. In this less than happy life, there were people who helped me. A couple living across the street. The husband, Dawson, and his wife, Bethany, lived together without children. Dawson's mother struggled living with her mother-in-law and decided he didn't want to cause such trouble. Bethany was there for me during my struggles with infertility and would listen to my complaints about my in-laws. Since my in-laws and husband have a good public image, Bethany was surprised at first. I thought your husband was a good man, but to see he still hasn't cut the apron strings at this age, honestly, it's a bit off-putting. Thanks to Bethany, I've been able to live through this life without feeling too burdened. Lorene, now over 75, still drives herself around. It's precarious to watch, and despite my warnings to my husband, he doesn't listen. When I suggest she should give up her license. Are you making fun of Mom? He gets furious, thinking I'm insulting his mother. I've tried hinting at it to Lorene, but she seems to think she's still quite young. Are you treating me like an old woman? How unpleasant. And she, like my husband, gets furious. I've been worried something serious might happen, and that day came in an unexpected way. That day, as usual, I walked to the nearby supermarket for groceries. Walking is mostly my mode of transportation since I don't have a driver's license. I thought I'd get it after starting work, but I got married sooner than expected. When I consulted my husband, "You don't need one since I'll drive." He opposed the idea of me getting a license. On sale days, the bags are inevitably heavy, but asking my husband or Lorene for a ride is out of the question. My husband, who once happily offered rides, now just clicks his tongue in denial. Carrying heavy bags, I returned home when I noticed the garage door was open. Did she say she was going out today? Lorene hadn't mentioned anything when I left the house. Well, it doesn't matter, I thought, as I passed by the garage heading towards the entrance. That's when it happened. With a roaring engine, a car sped out of the garage. Such a foolish word slipped out in surprise. The next moment, the car, without slowing down, crashed into me. The impact sent me flying backward, groceries spilling from my bags. Lying there, I was slammed onto the asphalt ground. Unable to grasp what had happened, a severe pain assaulted the back of my head where it hit the ground. Trying to get up was futile. My body wouldn't listen, and all I could do was stare at the sky. How much time had passed? Before I knew it, Bethany was peering down at me.
Hang in there. I've called an ambulance. It's going to be okay.
Bethany's face, as she spoke to me, was pale and strained. Had things really become so serious? That was the naive question that crossed my mind. Moving my aching head slightly, I could see blood flowing from it. Seeing that, I gradually began to understand the gravity of my situation. I started to realize the seriousness of the situation. But there was nothing I could do, as my body remained immobile. Eventually, I could hear the ambulance approaching, little by little.
Just a bit more. It's almost here. Hang on.
Bethany urged me desperately, as my head started to feel foggy.
No. Just a little longer.
Contrary to Bethany's words, I closed my eyes. When I next opened them, I was lying in a hospital bed. An 4 tube was attached to my hand, and I could see the fluid dripping without pause. Realizing I had been saved, tears naturally started to flow. Moving my head even slightly caused intense pain. Given the amount of blood I had lost, it was no wonder it hurt. Moaning on the bed, a nurse hurried over.
You shouldn't move your head yet.
There were so many things I wanted to ask, but I silently listened to the nurse's explanation. According to her, a day had passed since the accident. I had been rushed to the hospital by the ambulance team called by Bethany. I underwent surgery to stitch up my head and was saved. Bethany had stayed with me all this time, and now, outside visiting hours, she had gone home. It seems she had also contacted my husband, but after conveying the surgery's success, that was it. My whole body ached, but there was no life-threatening danger, and I was told to rest for a while. Even so, I didn't want to do anything for the time being. There were many things I needed to think about, but I closed my eyes anyway. Soon after, my phone beside the bed kept ringing. I didn't want to answer it, so I left it, but the persistent calls continued. After ignoring it several times, it didn't seem like it would stop. Careful not to move my head, I groped for my phone and saw Colt's name on the screen. Feeling a bit relieved that he might actually be worried, I answered the phone.
Help! Actually, my parents.
My husband started speaking without letting me say a word.
After you were taken away yesterday, the police came, but I told them you were startled by the car and fell. And now today, there's a testimony that Mom hit you.
Summarizing my husband's excited rant, it seemed both my in-laws had been taken to the police station. Indeed, yesterday, I was indeed hit and injured by the car Lorene was driving. Yet, the person who drove, Lorene, and the passenger, Myaphael Larry, had lied. They had conspired under my husband's instructions to make it seem like I had fallen and injured myself. I was dumbfounded and lost for words for a while.
The car, fortunately, wasn't damaged. Dad wasn't hurt, but Mom twisted her neck a bit from the collision with you. And yet, it's unfair how the police are being one-sided.
Unaware of my astonishment, he was worried about the car and his parents. How rotten can this family be? Since answering the phone, had he said even one word of concern for me? No, nothing. He was only worried about his parents being taken to the police, even going so far as to ask me, the victim, to prove their innocence.
Hey! Are you listening? Anyway, you need to go and explain that you just fell.
The number you have dialed is currently. Although my husband had been talking nonstop since the call connected, he was surprised by the first words I finally spoke.
Eh?
I then immediately hung up the phone. Afterward, calls from my husband continued for a while, but frustrated, I set my phone to reject his calls. Later, I found out that, just as my husband had said on the phone, my in-laws were taken to the police station. After a while, my husband himself was also taken to the police station where his parents were waiting. The entire episode was witnessed by Bethany, who lives across the street. Initially, it was Bethany who reported Lorraine's crime to the police. After riding in the ambulance with me and taking care of various procedures in place of my husband, she was questioned by the police about the accident. It seems she was questioned after the in-laws had been, making her testimony somewhat of a corroboration. Bethany noticed the accident when she heard a loud noise outside. Looking out the window, she saw me lying on the road. She then hurriedly called an ambulance and rushed outside. By then, Lorraine's car was nowhere to be seen, and she didn't understand what had happened. More than figuring out the cause, she was concerned for my well-being. Bethany told the police everything as it was. However, the in-laws immediately denied any police suggestions that I might have been hit by a car. Feeling something was off, Bethany pondered for a while even after the police officer had left. After seeing my surgery through, she went home and discussed it with her husband, Dawson. Then, Dawson came up with an unexpected solution.
The dash cam, it records 24/7. The scene should be right in front of the car, so it must have captured everything.
Together, they checked the camera installed in their car.
Just as I thought.
As Dawson predicted, the moment of the accident was recorded. There, unmistakably, was the moment Lorraine hit me with her car. After I fell, Larry's face appeared from the car window, but then the car drove off quickly. A clear hit and run. With the footage of the in-laws' crime in hand, the two went to the police station. And they proved that I hadn't simply fallen and injured myself. Upon receiving testimony from Bethany and others, the police immediately began questioning the in-laws. Despite the video evidence, the in-laws were reluctant to admit their guilt.
That video is fabricated. Someone is trying to frame me. Officer, please, you can't put an old woman in jail, can you?
Both Lorraine and Larry were embarrassingly defiant. Eventually, Lorraine admitted to the crime, saying,
"My son told me to hide it."
Indeed, my husband had instructed them to coordinate their stories. But to think Lorraine would betray her own son to save herself was beyond belief. Worn out from the interrogation, Larry confessed that although he was in the passenger seat, they fled, abandoning me. Upon their confessions, the police questioned my husband, who was also reluctant to admit his involvement. Then, a detective came to my hospital room.
Your parents both claim they were instructed by their son to cover up the accident. Initially, they lied extensively, but this seems to be the truth.
The detective proceeded with the conversation apologetically, considering my feelings. The car showed no significant damage or dents. If my husband had worried about damage to the car and had it repaired, that would constitute evidence tampering. However, my husband must have decided calmly that it wasn't necessary. Since then, I've had no desire to see my husband, who hasn't shown his face at all. I mentioned to the detective about the call from my husband during the in-laws' questioning. He had admitted to instructing his parents to align their stories. Hearing this, the detective sighed deeply.
I don't know what to say. I can only imagine how you feel.
The detective seemed to sympathize with me, having been betrayed by my family on top of suffering a serious injury. After a painful silence, the detective left the room. A few days later, as I was about to be discharged, the police contacted me again. Bethany, who came to pick me up from the hospital in place of my husband, drove me straight to the police station. There, the detective from the previous day greeted us. It turned out he was the same one who had heard the story from Bethany, and he led us together to a room. Inside, there were my haggard husband and in-laws. Alicia. As I entered the room guided by the detective, Lorraine suddenly began to tear up. I thought it was pretentious, but it seemed she was genuinely crying. Whether she felt relieved to see a family member or relieved to see me alive, I couldn't tell. We were shown to our seats and waited until Lorene had calmed down. We waited until Lorene regained her composure, comforted by a female officer. Finally calm enough to speak, Lorene, sitting next to Larry, who looked utterly exhausted, kept repeating, "I'm sorry." The specific agenda for the day was to align the details of the accident with me, the victim, involved. A screen was prepared, displaying the footage of the accident submitted by Bethany. As we watched, the detective progressed the conversation step by step. The in-laws answered the questions honestly, and I nodded in agreement, affirming the accuracy. The problem was whether my husband was involved. After hearing my story, his call history proved he had phoned me. Yet, he still claimed no recollection of instructing his parents, steadfastly denying his involvement. I hadn't recorded our conversation, so progress was difficult.
"You just want to bring me down too, you liar,"
my husband exclaimed at one point, becoming emotional despite the detective's attempts to calm him.
"Please stop. Lying further will only lead to your regret. Do you really want to betray your mom and dad just to save yourself?"
Lorene advised, but he wouldn't accept it. Feeling stuck, the detective intervened.
"So, you're saying your parents provided false testimony to the police?"
His words had a different weight than mine, silencing my husband.
"Your mother running you over is clearly captured in the footage, acknowledged by both of your parents. But according to you, your parents are attempting to lessen their guilt by implicating you as a co-conspirator."
The gravity of the detective's words made my husband's face contort.
"Do you understand? Your parents' crime becomes even more severe,"
he continued, leading my husband to finally admit his guilt. In the end, I must have realized the gravity of what was happening. The confession of my husband laid bare the crimes of all three. This prompted the police officers waiting in the room to start moving hurriedly.
"Regarding that,"
now a detective addressed me, questioning whether I would withdraw the complaint. The crimes committed by the three couldn't be erased, but this could significantly change their fate. However, I firmly refused.
"Though I was unharmed, fleeing right after the accident is inexcusable. I will file a complaint to ensure they are held accountable for their actions."
My decision caused a great stir among the three. Lorene cried out loud, and both Larry and my husband hung their heads in shame right there. They probably hadn't expected me to make such a ruthless decision. Each of them had never doubted they were a good husband, a good Lorene, and a good Larry. It seemed they had taken my forgiveness for granted. If the family had handled the aftermath of the accident properly, I wouldn't have gone this far. But my in-laws decided to sacrifice my life to protect themselves. My husband chose to prioritize his parents' and social appearance over his wife's life. I wanted them to reflect on the severity of their actions and properly atone for their sins. Silently, I stood up and left the room. Accompanied by Bethany, I began the various procedures in another room. These were my in-laws and husband I had lived with for years. It would be a lie to say my heart wasn't aching. Above all, I was the one who was hurt the most. Even though my physical wounds had healed, this trauma would follow me for life. I hadn't done anything wrong, yet I couldn't feel completely relieved. By the time I left the police station, the day had completely darkened. Bethany, considering my feelings, invited me to a dinner party as a celebration of my discharge. Grateful for my friend's thoughtfulness, I headed to Bethany's house. Warmly welcomed by Bethany and Dawson, we enjoyed a meal together. There, I laughed for the first time in a while. Both of them, while being considerate, treated me as usual. Even though the in-laws and husband who looked down on me were gone, I was now on my own. There were still legal proceedings and many things to do. Just thinking about it made me feel disheartened. But for that moment, I forgot all about it and truly enjoyed myself. After a delightful night, I decided to divorce my husband. There was no need to torment myself any further. It seemed he had learned a little from this incident, but I realized I couldn't love him anymore. I immediately signed the divorce papers and broached the subject of divorce with my husband. He initially seemed surprised at the divorce papers, but soon consented as if he understood. Unable to bear seeing my husband's pitiful state any longer, I left everything to my lawyer thereafter. The three faced criminal charges, and in addition, were ordered to pay me compensation in the divorce proceedings. Since the fault was on my husband, I received even more compensation from the divorce. Determined to leave my in-laws' house, I rented an apartment with the compensation from the divorce proceedings. I planned to start anew far away, but I decided to stay in the city I was familiar with. The reason I didn't move far away was because Bethany's husband, Dawson, ran a company. He invited me to help out at his company. Bethany was also helping with the work, and I thought it would be good to try it together. Although I had been invited several times before, I had given up due to what my in-laws and husband might say. Honestly, with the compensation from the divorce proceedings, I didn't need to work. But Bethany and Dawson were concerned about my well-being. Suddenly being alone, they gave me a purpose in life. Having spent decades as a housewife, working with a friend was very enjoyable. I was confused by all the new experiences, but they became a significant source of fulfillment for me. Thus, I embarked on a new life, and even more encounters awaited me. I ended up remarrying a man I met through work. I had told him about the divorce, but kept silent about the compensation until we got married. Yet, he didn't blame me.
It's natural to be cautious after going through so much,
he said with a smile. Past midlife, my life took a significant turn. I am probably happier and more fulfilled now than when I was younger. Despite being betrayed and hurt by those I had trusted for years, I grasped a greater happiness. Grateful to the friend and her husband who always extended their hands to me, I now step into a brighter future. The quiet of the room was shattered by the ringtone of a mobile phone. Grabbing the phone, the screen showed an incoming call from the daycare center attended by MIL Karen, causing a rush to answer.
Hello, this is Barbara. What's the matter? Is something wrong with Karen?
My hurried words, perhaps too fast, seemed not to be fully understood by the staff on the other end, who, instead of answering my question, began explaining the situation.
Actually, Karen has become quite ill. She's running a high fever, so we wanted to inform you. We can only provide first aid here. A fever, got it. I'll be there right away.
I immediately left the house and drove to the hospital. Luckily, by the time we arrived at the hospital, it seemed that the foreign medication had helped, and Karen's condition had stabilized. Bringing Karen back home, now with her fever somewhat reduced, we found ourselves unable to unlock the door, the key wouldn't turn, and we were both utterly baffled. Ringing the doorbell, my husband John eventually appeared.
Oh, you're back? I changed the locks, couldn't stand the smell anymore. I've made it so you and Mom can't enter the house anymore. Sleep in the garden or park. Cut it out. Karen's running a fever. I need to get her to bed, so open up.
John continued to mutter like a scolded child. My anger reaching its breaking point, I pulled out my mobile phone and called someone right then and there.
That's enough. Just remember, I won't be there when you regret this. Huh? Save your sleep talk for bed. I'll never regret it.
John, with a sneer as if mocking Karen's fever and my desperation, spat those words and slammed the front door shut, locking it with force.
Barbara,
Could you grab that sauce for me?
Sure, Karen. Sorry to always have you help with cooking.
It's okay. This is about all I can help with anyway. At 30, after breaking up with my then boyfriend, I spent months unable to forget him, dragging the weight of our past in my heart, thinking perhaps a new encounter in a pub might help me move on. The cycle of drinking to forget him for even a moment, only to spiral into pessimism, was relentless. Returning to the home I shared with him, where his belongings still remained, only brought the loneliness surging back. Yet, there was this one day. As usual, after work, I went to the pub alone, trying to fill the void inside me with a drink. The place was getting crowded, and a server asked me,
"Would it be all right if we seated someone else at your table?"
Feeling lonely drinking by myself, I agreed. Looking back, had I refused that day, I'd probably still be single and drinking alone right now. It was John who, by chance, was also at the pub and, with no seats available, ended up joining me for a drink.
"This place is always bustling, isn't it?"
Truly. Do you come here often for a drink?
"No, actually, it's my first time. I saw you from outside, and when I entered, they happened to seat me at your table by chance."
Even as I wondered if such dramatic encounters were even possible, I found myself enjoying drinks and conversation with John. As we shared our hobbies and work grievances, we clicked and exchanged contact information, heading to another pub together. The conversation never dwindled at the next pub, and as we drank, I thought how nice it would be to have someone like him by my side. Naturally, the talk shifted towards relationships. When I mentioned I had broken up with my boyfriend about 6 months ago, John shared that he too had ended a relationship about a year ago and was feeling the loneliness. Finding we had not only hobbies and job frustrations in common, but even our romantic pasts, I felt a sense of fate in meeting John. Under the dim lights, I took a leap and confessed to John, who I had just met that day. John looked surprised at first, but then looked straight into my eyes and accepted my confession. That was the beginning of what led to our marriage. We started living together at John's place with the intention to marry and got married 3 months later. Now, it's John, Emil, Karen, and I living as a family of 3. Karen, not very good at cooking, has been teaching me, and I've gotten quite better at it, enough to cook together. But even those happy days of cooking with Karen abruptly ended one day with a loud crash. It happened when I was out of the house for about 2 hours, due to a sudden request from a friend. Karen had offered to go grocery shopping for dinner in my stead. Though she was older and had been dealing with back issues, she had been advised by her doctor that moving around for daily chores was actually better, so I thoughtlessly asked her to do the shopping. In the evening, as I finished my errands, I received a call from Karen's doctor, informing me that she had missed a step on the stairs and injured herself. I also informed John, but he was too busy with work and couldn't make it within visiting hours, so I went to the hospital alone. Arriving at the hospital, I saw Karen lying in bed. The nurse told me that she had slipped on the supermarket stairs, fallen, and sustained a hairline fracture in her lumbar spine, and was currently under anesthesia to manage the pain.
"Karen, are you all right? I heard about the hairline fracture in your back."
Barbara, I'm sorry. I've caused you trouble. And I messed up the groceries a bit.
"Don't worry about that. You're more important than the groceries. John can't come because of work, but he might call later. I'll explain the situation to him too."
I'm sorry for causing trouble.
Seeing Karen downcast, possibly because of her injury, I made a point to smile and told her to focus on her recovery before heading home for the day. When John came back from work late at night and I told him about Karen, he seemed not to worry much. Feeling a bit upset with John's indifferent attitude towards his mom's injury, attributing it to her age. After a while, Karen switched to home care, and I arranged for her transport to the hospital, checked on her during my days off or before going to work, and even arranged for her to attend a daycare service for rehabilitation. During Karen's rehab and daycare sessions, I received a call from my Sayel, Mary, who had heard about the situation. Unlike us living in the countryside, she was bustling in the city among skyscrapers and crowds, showing concern for Karen, unlike the indifferent John. Mary and I have always had a friendly relationship, and I've been receiving her help. With Mary's base being in the city, she couldn't easily visit for condolences, so she offered financial support for the hospital bills and medication. John, known for his aversion to effort, was not cooperative with daily chores or helping with Karen's laundry. Even when I was on the phone with the diligent Mary, John seemed uncomfortable. Possibly due to their not-so-good relationship since childhood, and he started acting like a henpecked husband, seemingly out of spite towards me for being friendly with Mary. "Leave Mom alone. Barbara, I'm out of booze. Bring me the beer from the fridge, will you?"
John, don't be so harsh on Barbara, who's always working hard. Who do you think ensures you have a warm meal to eat?
Mary, laughing about her good-for-nothing brother, always sided with me, scolding John over the phone whenever he became arrogant, but John kept sulking and, this time, went to get his beer himself.
I really don't understand how John managed to marry such a good person. If there's anything other than Mom's issue bothering you, feel free to reach out to me anytime. Thank you so much, as always. I'll keep in touch about Karen or if anything comes up.
Thanks to Mary's financial support, we were able to continue with Karen's rehab and daycare services, and I was able to focus more on support. Karen had spoken so highly of me to the daycare staff that, unbeknownst to me, my reputation among them had risen.
When I talked about you to the people at the daycare service, they said you seem like such a wonderful person.
I got so happy, I ended up bragging about you a lot.
Thanks for the promotion.
I could only give a wry smile at the time, but thinking about how Karen must have really wanted to talk about me made her seem even more adorable, and I didn't feel bad about it. However, a tragic event would soon befall Karen, who had so endearingly promoted me at the daycare service. It was supposed to be my day off, but I ended up having to do some remote work due to an emergency meeting and document review. While I was focused on my work, the ringtone of my mobile phone suddenly filled the quiet room. Picking up the phone, I saw an incoming call from the daycare service Karen attends. Normally, I wouldn't receive calls from the daycare service except for pickup times, so I hurriedly answered the phone.
Hello, Barbara speaking. What's happened? Is something wrong with Karen?
Perhaps because I was hurried, my words came out quickly and the staff didn't answer my question directly but instead started explaining the situation.
Actually, Karen has become quite ill. She has a high fever, so we contacted you. We can only provide first aid here. A high fever, understood. I'll be right there. Karen has cold medicine in her pouch. Please give her that.
The fever was so high that I immediately messaged my boss, saying that my MIL was sick, and without waiting for a reply, I rushed out of the house and drove to the daycare. Despite the sudden notice, my boss replied while I was on the way to the hospital, assuring me that work was fine. Feeling relieved, I pressed the accelerator and headed to Karen. For most people, a cold might not be a big deal with medication, but for an 85-year-old, it could be a matter of life and death. The only first aid available would likely be cooling down the fever with an ice pack.
I'm glad I had Karen carry her medicine. We need to get her to the hospital quickly.
About 10 minutes later, I arrived at the facility just in time to see Karen being wheeled out in a wheelchair. With the staff's help, I got her into the car and drove straight to the hospital. Fortunately, by the time we arrived at the hospital, The medication had taken effect, and after receiving in 4, we were told to give her the current medication if the fever returns. The condition stabilized significantly after the 4, and Karen, who had been sleeping due to the fever and medication, woke up and was able to converse normally.
I'm really sorry for worrying you again, Barbara. Maybe I overdid it and that's why I got a fever.
Indeed, I've heard from the daycare staff and the person in charge of her back rehabilitation that she's been doing well. Perhaps the high fever was the result of Karen overexerting herself, just as she said.
It's important to try hard, but it's not good to overdo it and collapse, right? I would feel the same way, and if Mary were here right now, she might even scold Karen, you know?
True. If Mary were here, she'd probably scold me loudly. I'll be more careful from now on. As we engaged in light conversation, the time for the 4 quickly passed, and we were able to return home that day. Bringing Karen, whose fever had somewhat subsided, home, we found ourselves unable to unlock the door, completely puzzled as the key wouldn't turn at all. Seeing the lights on inside, it was clear John had already returned home. I rang the doorbell and tried to let us in through WhatsApp, indicating we were outside. John, noticing the doorbell, came to the entrance with the chain lock still on, showing his face unnaturally.
Oh, you're back? Why is the chain locked? Karen has a fever. Hurry up and unlock the door. And why won't the key fit?
Don't talk all at once. I changed the locks. Couldn't stand the smell anymore. Made it so you and Mom can't enter. Sleep in the garden or park.
What? That's something a child would say. Cut it out. Karen has a fever. I want to get her to bed, so open up.
John, please open it.
Noisy, I'm fed up with being disregarded by Mom, who never acknowledges how hard I try, always siding with Barbara and Mary.
Frustrated with John's endless childlike ranting, I took out my mobile phone and contacted someone. It was a gamble whether they would answer so late, but the call was promptly picked up. I quietly explained the situation to avoid John hearing and ended the call after getting an agreement.
No matter who you call, my mind won't change. Barbara and Mom sleep outside, all right?
That's fine. Just remember, I won't be there when you regret this. Huh? Save your sleep talk for bed. I'll never regret it.
John, with a sneer as if mocking Karen's fever and my urgency, closed the door forcefully and locked it.
Why has John become like this? I'm really sorry, Barbara. It's all right, Karen. I can handle it.
Initially, I thought about spitefully sleeping in the garden. I wouldn't mind doing so alone, but with Karen having a fever, it was not an option. Sleeping in the car was a possibility, but prioritizing Karen's health, we returned to the hospital, where Karen could stay overnight as an inpatient. After dropping Karen off at the hospital, I decided to spend the night at an internet cafe located about 5 minutes away by car. The next day, feeling utterly unrest and even more exhausted due to the unfamiliar environment, I went to pick up Karen. Considering our precarious lodging situation, I remembered Mary's offer to consult her anytime and immediately contacted her.
He must be fed up with us and trying to drive us out of the house. Unable to win by argument, he resorted to drastic measures. It must be his intention to drive out Mom, changing the locks and all. By the way, where did you sleep?
I managed to have Karen stay at the hospital for the night, and I stayed at a nearby internet cafe. But since we can't return home, I was wondering what to do next. Discussing the difficulty of recuperating in unfamiliar environments with a sick Karen, Mary astonishingly offered to help by introducing us to a hotel run by her acquaintance.
I'll take care of the costs, just stay there for now. I'll finish up my work as quickly as I can and come over.
With that, Mary, citing work commitments, ended the call and sent the hotel's location. For a moment, I wondered if it was okay to rely on Mary to this extent, but considering Karen's situation, there was no room for hesitation. I decided to pick up Karen and head to the hotel. Karen's condition had improved since spending a night at the hospital, though she still had a slight fever and was advised to continue taking her medication and rest. She likely never imagined she would experience such a high fever at over 80 years old. Despite appearing cheerful, I knew we were pushing her limits.
Barbara, were you okay last night? Where did you sleep?
It's fine. I stayed at a nearby internet cafe. More importantly, Mary has arranged for us to stay at a hotel run by her acquaintance, so we're sorted for accommodation now.
Knowing that Mary had arranged for a hotel stay seemed to reassure Karen a bit, and we got into the car headed for the hotel. Luckily, the hotel was only about 15 minutes' drive from the hospital. Mentioning Mary at the reception, it seemed they were already informed, and we were promptly shown to our room. The room we were given was surprisingly the most luxurious one, so grand that we wouldn't have easily afforded it even as regular tourists. While grateful, I couldn't help feeling somewhat guilty for the extravagance. Exploring the opulent interior in awe, a woman came into the room. It turned out she was the owner, a longtime friend of Mary's since high school, and they had even once competed for the same man, she shared with a sense of fun that suggested a deep friendship. After explaining to Karen that we had been driven out of our home by John and to rest after the stress of moving, I decided to try contacting John again. Hoping that his actions might have been impulsive due to being drunk, I dialed his number, harboring a faint hope for an apology. However, the mobile phone was off and unreachable. Resigning to wait for Mary's arrival, I focused once more on caring for Karen. 3 days later, in the afternoon, the owner came to inform us of Mary's arrival.
Karen, Mom, sorry for being late.
After a brief chat with the owner at the hotel entrance, Mary came to our room and brought us snacks. While enjoying coffee, I explained in detail what had happened.
Locked out. We have no idea what John is doing inside the house or the current state of the home.
Didn't we install a fall prevention rail or a camera by Karen's bed for emergencies? Remembering the camera I had installed for checking via mobile phone, I quickly took out my phone to view the current footage. The camera successfully displayed the room's image, allowing us to see inside the closed-off house. There were several cameras, each placed as hidden cameras in Karen's bedroom and other rooms she would use. Naturally, Karen's bedroom showed nothing, and there was nothing of concern in the toilet or washroom either. Watching the footage and checking for anything captured became oddly enjoyable despite the circumstances. The camera view switched to the entrance, and Mary suddenly pointed out something on the screen, asking us to pause. "Isn't that Barbara's coat?" Pointed out by Mary was a trendy, expensive-looking coat.
No, I don't own such an expensive coat. Plus, I always put my coats back in the closet, so it's strange for one to be at the entrance.
Does this mean it belongs to someone else? Let's check the footage from areas we haven't seen yet. Switching to the living room footage as per Mary's instruction, we saw John and an unknown woman eating together like a couple. The camera also recorded audio, and from their conversation, it was revealed that the woman's name was Elizabeth and that she was having an affair with John. Further watching and listening revealed that they had plans to marry someday and that Elizabeth disliked the elderly Karen, leading to our expulsion to give them space.
What is this? Kicking out Karen and Barbara, only to have his affair partner over.
I regretted my earlier leniency, wishing I could confront my past self for considering forgiveness if he had just apologized. How had John become such a man, to drive out his sick mother and me for an affair. I felt a mix of anger and sadness rising within me. Our minds were made up. I discussed the situation with the daycare service we relied on and, after ensuring Karen's stable condition post-recovery at the hotel, decided to confront John to uncover the whole truth.
He should be at his office by this time. Let's go. We'll make John confess everything in front of Barbara and ensure he apologizes.
After delivering Karen to the daycare facility, we headed to John's workplace. Claiming to be John's wife, I proceeded to his department, maintaining my dignity as his spouse.
Excuse me, I'm John Williams's wife. I've come to deliver something he forgot.
Amidst the commotion and smiles from John's colleagues, the faces of John and Elizabeth, unexpectedly a coworker, darkened. Successfully infiltrating, Mary and I first called John out alone, and then using his mobile phone, invited Elizabeth to discuss matters at a cafe. Sitting across from each other, John and Elizabeth opposite us, we ordered coffee. No one drank, and in the ensuing silence, an eerie atmosphere enveloped us. Reaching her limit with the tense atmosphere, Mary presented the infamous footage as evidence of the affair to both of them. Contrary to our expectations of them being flustered by the incontrovertible evidence, they brazenly defended their actions as if it was the most natural thing in the world.
What's wrong with that? It's my business who I spend my time with at home. We're in love. Elizabeth sees me for who I am, unlike Barbara and Mary.
Yes, we love each other.
I've always heard how Barbara neglects John.
We had previously arranged for someone to come to the cafe. Facing John and Elizabeth's arrogance.
Going to call a lawyer now?
But their confidence vanished instantly when the person arrived. Turning pale. Sorry for being late. Traffic was a bit heavy.
Why are you here, boss?
Indeed, the person I had called was John's company's CEO. I had attempted to secure an appointment since the day we were driven out, and during our stay at the hotel, I managed to discuss our situation. The CEO was aware of our circumstances because, as it turns out, his mother uses the same daycare service Karen attends, and Karen herself had directly informed him of the situation.
John Williams, was it? Your actions are inhumane, neglecting your mother and wife, aren't they? I think it's inappropriate for a CEO to comment on my personal affairs. I love Elizabeth, and just like at work, I eliminate obstacles to efficiency.
That's right, boss. We haven't done anything wrong. Barbara is the one mistreating John and playing the victim.
Perhaps deciding enough was enough, the CEO revealed something we weren't aware of.
However, claiming to be on business yet engaging in adultery at home during work hours is wrong, both as a person and as an employee, isn't it, John Williams?
This revelation surprised not me but Mary, who reached her breaking point first. Grabbing John by the chest, she showed an anger far beyond her usual scolding over the phone. We had to calm Mary down, fearing she might escalate further. It's understandable why Mary was so furious. Being career-oriented, her work always came first, and it was her dedication that allowed us to stay at the hotel. Learning that John had committed adultery during work hours and driven his family out for it understandably enraged her.
That's the situation. As you both might understand, the company cannot keep employees who engage in such activities during work hours. You're both fired.
Really? John desperately pleaded with the CEO to reconsider the termination, but the CEO's decision was final, leaving with a simple,
"Unfortunate."
With that, the CEO left for his next appointment, leaving us in the aftermath of his decisive action.
Just got fired, but as for the divorce proceedings and the compensation you're after, I'll sign the divorce papers as you wish.
Standing there, unable to grasp the reality of what just happened, I added insult to injury with my statement to the two of them.
Fine, I'll do the compensation and the divorce if it means I can be rid of Barbara. I'll have nothing to do with Mary or Mom from now on. Now we can finally build a happy home together.
Despite being fired and facing demands for compensation and divorce within minutes, their unfazed, childlike defiance was baffling. But as they said, this meant I no longer had to deal with John, and we could return to our home.
But I'm taking the house. Excuse me?
I looked it up before.
Selling that house now would bring in a significant amount of money. We'll sell the house and move abroad to live a comfortable life.
Hearing this, I was sure John knew nothing about the house or family matters, only what suited them.
John, you really don't know anything.
That house is in Karen's name, including the land rights.
So, John, you have no house or land to sell.
How do you plan to live abroad?
John, you might seem confident, but you have nothing left. No money, no status, no relationships.
John, shocked by the truth, realized he had been cornered since being fired. Suddenly changing his tone, John approached us in a panic, trying to ingratiate himself. But his efforts were futile. Elizabeth, witnessing our exchange, visibly recoiled at John's pathetic display. No surprise there. Seeing someone you admire crumble under pressure and attempt to ingratiate themselves with those in power would be off-putting to anyone.
By the way, John, Karen was listening to our conversation over the phone. If you have anything to say, now's your chance.
As Mary handed over the phone, John snatched it, desperately apologizing. However, no words of forgiveness came from the phone.
John, I may have raised you wrong, but I don't recall raising someone who doesn't value family. I no longer consider you my son. Don't show yourself to us again.
Karen's final words to John were of severance. John, unable to hide his shock at the final words,
"Are you abandoning me?"
received no reply as Karen had already hung up. Leaving John and a consoling Elizabeth behind, I placed the signed divorce papers on the table and left the cafe in high spirits. Deciding to at least pay for the coffee, I approached the cashier, only to learn the CEO had already covered the bill.
Typical of the CEO, discreetly taking care of the payment.
We'll have to thank him next time. Later, we had a locksmith open and then change the locks to prevent John's entry, eventually selling the house. The proceeds were planned for Karen's care, not at a daycare service but a proper care facility. After being fired, John and Elizabeth managed to convince Karen to speak to the CEO, leading to a 1-month suspension instead of termination, allowing John to return to work. However, rather than work earnestly, the two found themselves in financial difficulties and eventually dipped into the company's funds, which was discovered during a tax audit, resulting in John's dismissal. This betrayal was complete, not just to Karen but also to the CEO who had given him a second chance. Along with this, rumors of driving Karen out to live with his affair partner spread quickly, and feeling uncomfortable, John and Elizabeth ended up separating. John even reached out to me and Mary, hoping for assistance in some way. Needless to say, we wanted nothing to do with him, setting all communications to ignore, completely cutting off contact. Without anyone's help, John and Elizabeth struggled, unable to secure interviews for new jobs, likely due to rumors of their misconduct. Even when John managed to find work at a small company, he couldn't fit in, leading to a series of resignations and a descent into poverty as their savings dwindled. Contrasting their downfall, my life improved significantly. With Karen's care entrusted to a facility, I found time for myself, and through Mary's introduction, I ventured into a new job, finding it fulfilling.
Barbara, how's work? Are you managing well? It was tough learning everything from scratch, but now I genuinely enjoy my work. I hope to find a hobby while working, just like Mary.
That's good to hear. I'm doing well too. The staff here are kind, and I've even made some friends. Thanks to you and Mary, I'm enjoying my days here. Thank you.
The thanks are all mine. Mary's visiting soon, so we'll go out together again.
Karen, once feverish and frail, is now vibrant and healthy. Unbeknownst to her, Karen's welcoming smile energizes me and Mary every time we visit the care facility. I hope Karen spends the rest of her life smiling.
You think you can chime in on the project being just a temp? That's above one's pay grade. She glared at me fiercely. Get out of here, now. After my idea was stolen, I reached my breaking point. Okay, I'll leave. The next morning, the CEO insists on meeting you. The person who welcomed me in the CEO's office was someone unexpected. I'm Yolanda, working in the editorial department of a publishing house as a temp. Always keep smiling. That's my motto. I chose this job because I loved the bookstore that Mom ran. I used to help out at Mom's store and loved reading books. Mom often recommended books to me that were a bit too challenging for a primary schooler. Whenever I grumbled not understanding them, Mom would advise me, even if it's hard, work hard at what you should do. If you keep at it, you'll start to enjoy it. I adored Mom, who loved books. Mom passed away when I was in the 4th grade. I vividly remember the last time I saw her. I was by her side, holding her hand and talking to her. She whispered, "Yolanda, you came." Mom, who was always surrounded by books and smiling, was now frail. As I started to cry loudly, Mom smiled faintly and said, "Don't cry. Please smile for me." I replied, holding back my sobs, "Yeah, I'm smiling." That was our last meeting. Since then, I decided to always keep smiling. Afterward, I was taken in by relatives, and Mom's bookstore closed down. Then I studied hard to work in a field related to books, just like Mom. But struggling to fit in at my relatives, I started working as soon as I graduated middle school. Eventually, I signed up with a temp agency and was assigned to this publishing house. Everyone here is so kind to me. They always say my smile is nice and that I work hard. Except for one person, my supervisor, Octavia. When are you planning to submit that report? Octavia, the acting assistant editor-in-chief, came to my desk as usual this morning. With a sharp gaze and cold voice, she came to harass me. This report is due the day after tomorrow." "Oh, submitting at the last minute? You do make a lot of mistakes, don't you?" "I'm sorry about last time. I'll finish it quickly." "Well, you must have some spare time then. Take care of this." Octavia, a long-serving employee with a strong opinion. Understood. I forced a smile and took the documents. I'm willing to endure hardships and always keep smiling. That's a promise I made with Mom. You're so carefree. Octavia seemed to have it out for me. Only to me, she would ask to make coffee several times a day, assign me menial tasks, and that was just the beginning. She lied about me, said in front of male colleagues she farted. She would bump into me in secluded places, whispering, "Drop out," or "Ugly." She never harassed me in public, but was harsh and approached me just to make mean comments. Most employees, intimidated by her sharp tongue, didn't know about her more sinister side seen only when she was alone with her target. To them, she was just a somewhat mean supervisor. Additionally, Octavia once had a very close relationship with one of our senior executives. That's why no one could really stand up to her. After a busy morning, I took a sigh of relief during lunch break. When I returned to my desk, I was quickly summoned by the EIC. "Did you call for me?" There, the EIC and Octavia were waiting.
About this document.
Looking over the document I was handed, I noticed the client's name was wrong. I'm sorry, I'll correct it immediately. As I hurriedly apologized, I thought, wasn't this the one Octavia handed to me earlier?
Octavia noticed it. You should be thankful.
Thank you, Octavia said with a nasty smirk, as if she'd won. Temps really are the worst. No sense of responsibility. The EIC calmed her down.
No. It's hard to believe you'd make such a mistake. Are you tired?
No, I'm fine. Sorry. Octavia interjected. Or is it because you're a dropout? The EIC frowned for a moment, but said nothing to Octavia.
Yolanda, let me reiterate. Be more careful in the future.
I'm very sorry. I spent the afternoon feeling down. Octavia had intentionally made me sign a document with a typo. How could I fall for such a shallow trick? I felt so foolish. I bit my lip hard, holding back tears. By the time work ended, I was utterly exhausted. Walking weakly through the darkened city, I wished I could just go somewhere where no one knew me. That's when I noticed a narrow alley I usually passed by. Looking closer, I saw a neon sign reading, "Used Books," far down the alley. I had never noticed a used bookstore here before. I wanted to be surrounded by books again, to leisurely pick one up. As if beckoned, I walked down the narrow alley. The store was smaller than I expected. The automatic glass door read "Used Books," let light spill into the alley. The modestly sized bookstore was packed with tall shelves and an array of books.
Welcome.
Entering the store, an elderly man who seemed to be the owner greeted me from behind the register. A stylish and dandy old man, in an unexpected place, a small alley's used bookstore. I was a bit taken aback. Hello. It seemed I was the only customer. The calming scent of used books filled the air. It was different from Mom's store. A mix of irrational disappointment and a refreshingly pleasant feeling left me confused. Looking closely at the shelves, I found a variety of books cozily lined up. Then, a familiar title caught my eye. A book I read as a child. It was one of my mom's many favorites, one she even read to me. The book, faded to a gentle cream color, was beautifully aged. Clearly it had been cherished. A warm feeling spread in my chest. How nostalgic. Tears welled up in my eyes, blurring my vision. Really, I'm such a crybaby today. I quickly wiped my tears with my sleeve. I'll buy this book and take it home. Decided, I headed to the register. I'd like to buy this, please. The old man looked up and smiled.
Thank you.
While checking the book, he glanced at me. His eyes must have been red.
It's nice to see a young lady like you buying used books.
The old man continued in a gentle voice.
Used books are cherished and passed down.
Seeing his toothy grin, I smiled back naturally. A wave of emotions I couldn't contain overwhelmed me. Oh. As I took out my wallet to pay, I started crying right there. Tears kept flowing, and I even started hiccuping.
There, just wait a moment.
The old man brought a towel from the back for me. He brought out a small chair from under the register for me to sit on, and he sat on a step stool in the aisle, waiting patiently until I calmed down. Wiping my face with the towel, I finally spoke. I'm sorry for the trouble.
Not at all. Don't worry about it.
Thank you. The old man introduced himself as Garrett Powell. The used bookstore was Mr. Powell's, started when he was younger.
Do you like this book, Yolanda?
Yes, my mom loved it.
I see. Love must be the true justice then.
Mom used to say something similar. We shared a small laugh. Thank you for the towel. I'll wash it and return it.
That's very kind of you. Come again.
I thanked him and left the store. When I returned the next Saturday to return the towel, Mr. Powell, seeing my nervousness, said,
Welcome back.
Since then, I started visiting Mr. Powell's bookstore every weekend. We talked a lot in front of the store. About books, of course, and also life stories, and even about work. Mr. Powell, being a used bookstore owner, was very knowledgeable about the publishing industry. Gradually, I started confiding my work frustrations to Mr. Powell. One day, I talked about a project that wasn't going well. Right now, I'm working on a project called Top 10 Heartwarming Literary Works for Elementary School Students.
Oh, that sounds nice.
It's a collection of books Mom recommended to me when I was a child. Unfortunately, my project was discovered by Octavia and got crushed. Remembering it made my face darken. Mr. Powell encouraged me.
Feel free to talk to me about anything.
I shouldn't bother you. While saying this, I unintentionally opened up about not being able to become a full-time employee and the harassment I was receiving from Octavia. Mr. Powell thought for a moment and then encouraged me with a kind voice.
Don't worry, your troubles will resolve in time.
I hope so. Then Mr. Powell said something odd.
I'll come and see your work sometime.
What do you mean? Will you bring a proposal to our office, Mr. Powell?
Maybe I'll bring 1 or 2 proposals.
That would be great. Though his joke lightened the mood, my anxiety didn't disappear. The following week, an incident occurred. Before lunch, the EIC called several employees, including Octavia.
Okay, everyone, I've gathered you here for our special project. We've decided to go with Octavia's proposal.
Documents were handed out to everyone. It read, Octavia's Project. Top 10 famous books to recommend to children. No way. The content was eerily similar to my own project.
In the afternoon meeting, we'll discuss the details.
Wait a minute, that project is mine. Some were shocked. Others awkwardly fell silent or quietly returned to their work. Octavia laughed mockingly. I always knew she was odd. Her tone was full of disdain. I have proof. I rushed back to my seat, searching through my drawers. There should have been a presentation document. Why? Why can't I find it? It's not here. I thought the file was on the company computer. I hurriedly checked the folders, but the file was gone. The EIC approached me, speaking cautiously.
Calm down, okay?
I clenched my teeth in frustration.
Yolanda, let's talk.
There's no need, Octavia interrupted loudly. This woman without any reason is calling me a thief. She's just jealous because she's a dropout. Everyone in the office was looking at us uneasily. Whispers were heard around. That's it. She's trying to steal my project. Octavia continued in a low voice. As a temp, she shouldn't be meddling in projects. That's above one's pay grade. She glared at me fiercely. I'll tell the boss about this. You're fired. The EIC, hearing the mention of the boss, froze, looking dismayed and rooted to the spot. Get out of here now. Octavia's shout pushed me to my breaking point. Okay, I'll leave.
Yolanda.
It's okay, EIC. I'll be in touch. With those words, I grabbed my bag. Striding out of the office, I exhaled deeply. I wasn't convinced. But having come this far, it couldn't end without consequences. First thing tomorrow, I need to explain the situation to the temp agency. I headed home with weary steps. The next morning, I woke up with a heavy head and my eyes pained from crying. I was about to get ready to visit the temp agency. My mobile phone rang. It was an external call from the editorial department. Hesitant at first, I quickly pressed the call button. Hello?
Yolanda, I'm so glad.
It was the EIC on the line. EIC, I'm sorry for the trouble.
Actually, our company's CEO wants to meet you. Can you come to the office now?
Yes, I understand.
I'll be waiting for you.
After the call, I became anxious. Our company, a major publishing house, has a subsidiary office that specializes in monthly magazines. I wondered why the CEO, whom I rarely meet, wanted to see me personally. Could it be I was being wrongly accused and sued? My head felt even heavier. Still, I got ready and dragged my heavy feet to the office. Just as I reached for the doorknob, the door opened from the other side. Oh!
Yolanda, we've been waiting for you.
Despite my surprise, the EIC greeted me with a beaming smile. As I stepped inside, I saw a few people looking at me curiously. For some reason, Octavia wasn't here.
Well, this morning, President Powell suddenly visited and insisted on meeting you.
Wait, that's right. Our CEO's name is also Powell.
He was concerned when he found out you weren't here, and asked about yesterday, so I briefly filled him in.
I'm really sorry.
No, it's me who should apologize. Let's talk later.
The EIC knocked on the conference room door, and a voice said,
Come in. Go ahead.
To my surprise, the familiar old man from the used bookstore was sitting inside. Mr. Powell! Dressed in a more formal suit than usual, Mr. Powell greeted me with his usual bright smile.
I've heard about this situation. Have a seat here.
Mr. Powell, why are you here?
Well, I came to see you, of course.
Excuse me? The EIC brought coffee for me.
If you need anything, just let me know.
He bowed deeply and left the room. I finally asked, Mr. Powell, you're our CEO?
Surprised?
Very much so. The CEO laughed heartily. President Powell explained that he had maintained the small, used bookstore he started with his wife when young, even as his publishing company grew into a large enterprise. He still spends time at the bookstore on weekends, and whenever he has time. He had realized after some time that I was working at his company. Since there had been specific discussions about me, it wasn't hard to notice. He had kept his identity a secret, thinking I wouldn't open up to him if I knew he was the CEO.
About Octavia.
Mr. Powell's tone became serious.
I've seen her proposal. It's strikingly similar to yours.
Yes, that...
A project filled with memories of your mom.
Yes. I felt a surge of emotion. President Powell said,
Octavia will be transferred elsewhere. Sorry for the trouble.
No trouble at all. A tear rolled down my cheek, along with a bashful smile. Afterward, I was officially employed as a full-time staff member at our company. Everyone in the office was caring as before, perhaps even more protective. Customers began to trust me and entrusted me with many projects. Eventually, I received a letter from Octavia. It contained an apology and her candid feelings. She was envious of my earnestness, something she lacked. She admitted to secretly disposing of the documents on my desk and deleting the computer data to claim the project as her own. I still talk with President Powell at the used bookstore on weekends. Once I asked why he was so kind to me. He revealed that my maternal grandfather and he were old acquaintances. Apparently, my grandfather was Powell's mentor when he studied business in college. This connection led to a friendship with President Powell's son, my colleague. We hit it off and eventually went on several outings together. Soon after, we got married. It's been 15 years since. After becoming pregnant and having a child, I left the editorial department. Now I live a peaceful life with my husband and daughter, helping to run Mr. Powell's used bookstore.
Oh, wait, what? This means I couldn't help but let out a surprised murmur. I was in a state of confusion, not fully grasping the situation, but then it dawned on me this was my ticket to freedom. The more I thought about it, the happier I felt. My life was about to begin anew. It turns out I was the type whose efforts pay off later in life. I'm Emily, a 38-year-old housewife. My husband Robert is 3 years older than me and works in an office. We met when Robert visited my workplace on business. Robert and I shared the same last name. It was a surprise, especially since it wasn't a common last name, but rather an unusual one. This surprise sparked our initial communications. One day, we discovered that we hailed from the same hometown. I had moved to the city for college, so this shared background brought us even closer. Talking to him every day became the highlight of my day. Eventually, Robert asked me out to dinner, and that's when our relationship really took off. After several dates, Robert confessed his feelings and we started dating. Both of us had a strong desire to marry, so it didn't take long for marriage to become a realistic prospect. We got married after 6 months of dating. We didn't have a wedding ceremony, though. At the time of our marriage, my dad fell ill. The mood wasn't right for a celebration, so we decided to skip it. Since I was quite busy, Robert took care of the marriage paperwork. After marrying at Robert's request, I quit my job to focus on household duties. Robert, influenced by his mother, Isabel, being a housewife, was resistant to the idea of a working woman. I had always dreamed of my job, so giving it up was something I struggled with. I hinted this to Robert, but he was unwavering in his decision. He firmly insisted I become a housewife. Swept up in the thrill of marriage, I eventually consented. Despite my boss's sarcastic remarks about how unusual it was these days, I resigned. So began my married life with Robert, living just the two of us in an apartment. We thought about building a house but decided to wait until we had children. Although we wanted kids, they didn't come as easily as we had hoped. In the first year of our marriage, something unexpected happened. We started living with Robert's mother, Isabel, making it a 3-person household. There was a reason for Isabel moving in with us. Initially, Isabel had refused to live with us, so in a way I felt relieved thinking we could maintain a comfortable distance. But suddenly, she proposed moving in. Apparently, Isabel had accumulated substantial liabilities due to gambling and had become desperate. She had to sell her own house, leaving us no choice but to accept her. Without any prior discussion, suddenly a large amount of her belongings arrived at our home. When I expressed my shock to Robert, he casually said,
"It's a good opportunity, since Mom is getting old. If she fell at home alone, nobody would find her, and since she eats so little, our expenses won't increase much."
I was now destined to spend my days with Isabel. I absolutely hated that idea. It made me wish I could go back to work. When I mentioned this to Robert, he became aggressive, saying,
"Are you mocking me by working? Do you find it amusing to spread the word that my income alone isn't enough for us?"
In this day and age, dual income is not at all uncommon and everyone around me works. That's why they can afford stylish clothes, something I envied. With my mere $100 monthly allowance, I could only afford high school level cosmetics. My clothes were limited to sale items from local clothing stores. I was growing increasingly frustrated with this lifestyle. Before marrying, I loved fashion and worked in a magazine's editorial department. Since getting married, I hadn't been able to wear the clothes I liked. I wasn't even trusted with the household finances and was handed $100 a week. That was all I had to manage, our living expenses, including food. Honestly, $100 a week was tough for living expenses. No matter how many times I brought this up to Robert, he would refute it, saying,
"I know someone who manages on $80 a week."
It's not that it's entirely impossible. I could make do by preparing budget meals, but then the complaints are tremendous. That's right. Robert subjects me to emotional abuse. If he were still saving money, maybe it would be tolerable, but Robert doesn't save at all, indulging in excursions. He's reckless with both money and time. It's not uncommon for him to miss the last train after a night out and return by taxi, and he plays golf whenever he pleases. On top of that, any mistakes he makes somehow become my fault. If he oversleeps, it's blamed on me. If he loses a document, I'm the first to be suspected. My friends can't hide their surprise at Robert's behavior since we got married. His personality seems like that of a different person. I feel like a hired housekeeper in my own home. And with Isabel's arrival, I feel even less alive. However, Isabel had nowhere else to live. She moved into the room we had kept open for future children. From that day, my hellish days began. Firstly, Isabel wakes me up early in the morning. She wakes up at 4 a.m. every day and tells me to wake up even earlier. In the cold winter, it's expected that a housewife wakes up before everyone else to warm up the house. For some reason, it's seen as natural for a housewife to sacrifice herself for the family despite not having chosen this housewife life for myself. This mindset is imposed on me. Then Robert and I drink almost every night, discussing how I am an incompetent wife. The cost of the alcohol is included in my $100 weekly allowance, making living impossible. Talking to Robert about this gets me nowhere, so I end up using my savings from before I was married. It's becoming increasingly depressing. Even when I consult my mom, she says, "You have to accept it for now. Bad things will return to those who do evil. Just live each day honestly, believing that. If worst comes to worst, you can always divorce and he'll be a stranger. I won't be around forever either." When I listen earnestly, she continues, "Don't worry, Emily. You're the type whose efforts will pay off later. You have always ended up lucky in the end since you were a child." I have always trusted my mom's words since childhood. Whenever I go to her with problems, she never gives me the answers I want. But somehow, she always manages to convince me. Being an only child, I worry about my mom who lives far away. And since my dad hasn't fully recovered from his illness, I can be at ease. However, I like the freedom to visit my parents' home easily. When people hear all this, they wonder why I don't just get a divorce. I would probably think the same if I heard it from a friend, but there's a reason for it. It's Robert's duality. In front of Isabel, Robert acts like a tough, henpecked husband. He even gives me orders and, as I mentioned before, subjects me to emotional abuse. But when it's just the two of us, he's different. He tries to listen to my opinions and cries when I say I'm at my limit with this lifestyle. He always says,
"You're the only one I can show my weak and lousy side to. If I didn't have you, I might as well end my life."
Robert has an unstable side, so I can't take these words lightly. In the end, things always remain ambiguous and our fights fizzle out. But I have nothing but dissatisfaction with this life. I can't imagine ever getting used to a life where I'm tormented by Isabel all day. Moreover, we live in an apartment that's not particularly spacious. It's a 2 living drawing kitchen where I've been living since my single days. I can't avoid seeing them constantly. Amidst all this, a major incident occurred. My banking card went missing. I was sure it was there just the day before, and there were no signs of my room being ransacked. At first, I thought it was my mistake and searched desperately. But the place where I keep my important things is always the same, so it was strange. Then something suspicious happened. Isabel suddenly bought an expensive bag. Frankly, there's no way she could afford such a thing. She usually gambles away her pension as soon as she gets it. I suspected Isabel. But it was hard to confront her directly, so I consulted Robert. "I think the money for Isabel's bag might be from my account," I said. Robert looked at me as if I were foolish and became aggressive.
"Are you saying there's a thief in the family? Are you trying to blame Mom so you can extort more money from me? Cut it out."
I was astounded. It took a lot of courage to even bring up this topic. Money issues are delicate, and I knew it would definitely worsen our relationship. There had been a few times before when money disappeared, but I had endured it. Isabel, after all, had fled to my house with no money due to her gambling. I didn't want to suspect her, but I couldn't help it, and Robert adamantly defended her. Having no one else to suspect, I decided to report the missing banking card to the bank. I had no intention of making a big deal if she had just told me honestly, but now I had no choice. When I said I would go to the bank the next day to check the withdrawal history, Isabel, as expected, started to panic. "Don't do that. You probably spent it yourself and forgot. It's better not to embarrass yourself like that," she insisted, clearly not wanting me to see the records. But with my banking card missing, that was the only way to check. Finally, Isabel gave in. "Fine, I admit it. I just borrowed a little. I was going to pay it back with my pension next month." I couldn't stay silent any longer. This was theft, and it was outrageous to report borrowing money after the fact. And what made me even angrier was what followed. Hearing this, Robert laughed.
"Mom, if you were in trouble, you should have just told me. Why did you buy a brand bag?"
Isabel replied, "Well, I'm meeting old friends next week, like a reunion. I can't go looking shabby, right? So I bought it. I'll sell it after the reunion and turn it into cash." It somehow turned into a laughing matter. I couldn't find anything funny about it. The mother and son taking it lightly and laughing without any apology. I had reached my limit. Our relationship had always been strained. They constantly criticized the food I cooked and they never helped clean. Yet they arrogantly complained about me being an incompetent wife. I could hear Isabel gossiping about me on the phone with her friends bad-mouthing me. I didn't need to defend such people. At that moment, I felt as if I had broken free from some sort of brainwashing. That night, Robert said to me,
I'll cover the cost of Isabel's bag, so don't make a big deal out of it. I know she feels bad about it.
That gave me goosebumps. His attitude was so different, it made me suspect he had a split personality. I had made up my mind. I'm leaving this house. Once I decided, I knew I had to act quickly. I started looking for a job. I didn't care about their complaints anymore. To live my life my way, I had to cut ties with them. So I went to the Employment Development Department to get a referral. I needed identification documents. But I didn't have a driver's license. I wasn't on Robert's insurance plan and had been paying my insurance premiums myself. I'm not proud of it, but I rarely get sick. I hadn't been to the hospital since getting married. Robert manages my insurance card, so I don't want to ask him for it. This is because I'm planning to tell him only after I've secured a job. So I went to get my residence registration. Looking at the residence registration, I was shocked. Wait, what? This means my voice escaped me unintentionally. For some reason, I was still listed as unmarried. The address was correct, our current apartment, but it was originally my apartment. So there was no need for an address change. Confused by the situation, I couldn't quite understand what was happening. I impulsively asked the municipal office staff, "Does this mean I'm not married?" The staff responded with a troubled expression. Understandably so, they had probably never been asked such a strange question before. But once it was confirmed, the situation changed completely. I could be free. I looked over the document again and again, feeling happy. Could such an unbelievable miracle really happen? My life was about to begin, a new start for my life. I returned home from the municipal office feeling light-footed and quickly arriving home. As soon as I got home, Isabel demanded, "I'm hungry. Make dinner quickly." I no longer needed to do that. In fact, I never needed to. But if I left now, Isabel's lack of understanding would just be annoying. So I decided to wait until Robert came home. I served Isabel some reheated convenience food which she ate while complaining. Everything about them felt repulsive now that I realized they were strangers. That night, I told them I had something to discuss and asked for their time.
Robert said to me, "Unlike you, Emily, I'm tired from work. Can't this wait for a day off? Don't make me fit into your idle schedule."
He spoke with an air of annoyance. Isabel joined in. "Exactly. It's probably some trivial matter anyway. Make it quick. I don't want to waste even 5 minutes on you." She glared at me. Their attitude was only acceptable for now. For me too, it was a waste of time, so I got straight to the point. Let's get to the main topic. This house is under my contract. Both of you need to leave. They were stunned. Then Robert laughed.
Wait, Emily, did you hit your head or something? What are you talking about? You know Mom has already sold her house, right? What are you saying? That you will make Mom homeless? Are you out of your mind?
He laughed, but his eyes weren't smiling. Isabel also retorted, "How dare you say that? You're only able to live because Robert works and you can't even be grateful? If that's the case, you should be the one to leave." Robert and Isabel clearly didn't grasp the situation. So I decided to explain everything from the beginning. I asked Robert, "Was there no issue with the marriage application?" He claimed ignorance when I revealed it wasn't processed. Isabel turned pale. But Robert still didn't understand. He said to me,
"I think they mentioned something, but I didn't want to hear it, so I left. But it's the city hall's fault for not processing it, not mine." Again, it happened. His usual habit of blaming others. I can't deal with it anymore.
Isabel then said to me, "It's not too late, right? Just submit the marriage application again. You have it, don't you?" I replied, "I have been taken for granted too much. There's no way I'm going to marry now, especially not in such a foolish way. And this apartment is in my name. You two are just parasites. That's why I'm telling you to leave." Realizing what I meant, Isabel got angry. "You are committing marriage fraud. Living off my son's money while not being married, it's scary." It was all nonsensical. Again, I told them it was a waste of time. Finally understanding, Robert said, "I get what Emily is saying. Maybe Mom has been too harsh on Emily. Mom should leave and we'll start over. I'll pay for Mom's moving expenses." Unexpectedly, they started falling out. Isabel retorted, "This mess is because of you, Robert. You are irresponsible. It's your fault." They started arguing. I had no interest in their family quarrel. I said, "Sorry, but this is a waste of time. I'm not blaming either of you. I just dislike you both. So could you please argue after moving out? If not, I'll leave." Upon hearing this, Isabel happily said, "You're leaving? Then Robert and I can live here, right?" Repeating her thoughtless remarks. I don't want them to know my address anymore, so I have no intention of continuing to live here. I plan to manage with my savings for a while, so living alone won't be a problem for me. The next day, I started a friend from a previous company. They laughed and helped me out. Thanks to a friend's help, I was rehired at my previous company. The people there knew about my former husband, Robert. The news spread quickly, even reaching his workplace. Robert was apparently disliked at his company, and the bad rumors about him spread so much that he couldn't stay there anymore. He voluntarily resigned 3 months later. The day after our big fight, I quickly found a new place and moved out. I also canceled the lease on the apartment that was in my name. Robert and Isabel left as if fleeing. Afterward, the two prideful individuals started living in a property that was beyond their means. Their lifestyle without any savings soon collapsed. They ended up living in a 40-year-old apartment. Losing his job made life difficult for Robert. His pride, which he had always flaunted at the company, was to have become a recluse, probably living a life of drinking despite having no money. Once, I saw him in a grocery store parking lot holding a can of beer. I was truly grateful that we weren't actually married. Now they're living off Isabel's small pension. As for me, thankfully, I'm now employed full-time and enjoying my work. It's a stark contrast to the days when I lived on a $100 monthly allowance. I can now invest in myself and every day is enjoyable. I've been assigned to work on a magazine for women in their 40s. I'm so happy now that those hellish days feel like a distant memory. Every day is fun, and it feels like a new life has started. I hope to continue living days that bring me joy.
Grace and Jake, you'll be sleeping in the yard and taking care of the kids. Cameron, my son Liam's wife, sneered as she announced this, bringing their 7 grandchildren for the summer. Excuse me? My husband Jake and I stared at Cameron, thinking we must have misheard. But there she stood, correcting nothing, with that unpleasant smile. We've had little to do with Cameron before, but her showing up out of the blue, acting all high and mighty, was unbelievable. The 7 grandkids looked at us with worried eyes. Despite the situation, Liam lounged on the couch, nonchalantly opening a bottle of alcohol. Jake and I discussed what to do next in our bedroom. Images of Liam, Cameron, and the grandchildren kept popping into my head. We've got to take action. I agree. We stood before Liam and Cameron, who were now drunk, and said, Grace and the rest, you're still here. Your sleeping spot is over there. Frustrated but calm, I looked at Jake and said, Shall we go back to our own home? Yeah, that's all I have to say, and start packing my things, leaving behind the stunned Liam and Cameron and our adorable grandkids. We quietly headed back to our original home. My name is Grace. I'm 74 years old. I've lived as a housewife since marrying Jake, but I have another side. I've found a serum perfect for skin. Ready for winter now. I post a picture of the serum on a well-known photo-sharing social media, and instantly, my post is flooded with likes. That's right. I'm a beauty influencer in my 70s, popular on social media. I've always been told I have beautiful skin and was interested in beauty, always searching for the right products. About 2 years ago, I started sharing my hobby on social media. Comments like, "Can't believe you're in your 70s," and my inspiration quickly spread, gaining followers from young girls to women my age. Now I even earn money by promoting products for cosmetic companies. Making money from my hobby has become my passion. Jake, once a singer, retired in his 60s but still loves singing, often going to karaoke or holding personal recitals. We, a couple, living for our hobbies, had no complaints about life. But one thing worried us. I wonder if Scarlett and the others are doing all right. I sighed, thinking of my granddaughter, a freshman in high school. We haven't seen them for 3 years now. I understand they're busy, but it's not just Scarlett. We haven't seen any of the grandkids in 3 years. They live in the next town over, close enough to visit any time. They seemed to like us, waving cheerfully the last time we met. I have an idea why they suddenly stopped coming around. To explain, I need to talk about my son. Liam, my only child, is 45 years old. He was smart, obedient child growing up, never rebellious, leaving me both happy and a bit sad. However, I was hoping that it would be fine as long as it grew well. But after graduating high school and starting work in construction, his behavior deteriorated. At the time, I didn't know, but his company was infamous for employing troubled youths in the area. Many of them would recommend the job to each other, so most employees were from that crowd. Since moving here after marrying Jake, I was out of touch with local issues, being a housewife and all. On top of that, since I was working as a housewife, I didn't even know about the companies that existed in the area. In hindsight, I should have advised Liam more on choosing his job, but it's too late for regrets. Possibly due to a delayed rebellious phase, Liam became increasingly difficult and stopped having proper conversations with us. I was surprised when Liam suddenly told me he was getting married 16 years ago. It was a hasty wedding because Cameron, Liam's wife, was pregnant. I was worried if Liam could handle parenting. But once Scarlett, our granddaughter, was born, she was so adorable that Liam's character hardly mattered anymore. After marrying, Liam and Cameron had more children, and we ended up with 7 grandkids. I never imagined Liam would become a big daddy, but all the grandkids were so cute, and Jake and I were overjoyed thinking Liam was finally showing some filial piety. The grandkids often visited our home, especially Scarlett, the eldest, who was always cheerful and caring towards her younger siblings. "Scarlett, take these sweets home. Share them with everyone." "Thanks, Grandma," she'd reply, happily clutching the sweets, distributing them to her siblings. "I'll be back soon." They always promised to return soon and usually did within a week. Our house seemed like a second home to them, which made me happy. However, our joy with the grandkids was abruptly taken away 3 years ago. The cause had to be their parents, Liam and Cameron. The last words from the eldest grandchild, "See you next week," had been bothering me. I knew they were sincere and wouldn't say such things if they didn't mean it. But I kept telling myself they must be busy or have other commitments. Then one day, Jake, looking sad, asked, "How are the grandkids doing?" After about half a year of their absence, I called Liam's house. "Hello? Liam, it's me." "Grace?" I called on a Sunday morning. Likely time for Liam to be home, but Cameron answered. She sounded annoyed, knowing it was me, which unsettled me. It's just a call to my son. There's no need for such hostility, I thought, feeling irritated. Cameron, hi. Is Liam there? Can you put him on?" "Liam's not at home right now." "Oh, is that so?" I wondered what he was doing out so early on a weekend, but then I thought to ask Cameron about the grandkids. "So, Cameron, I wanted to ask you something." I figured it was fine to inquire about the grandkids with Cameron, so I asked her why they hadn't been visiting lately. In an angry tone, "The kids are busy with school, so they can't come over to your house for a while," she said. "That's unfortunate. Busy is busy. I sighed, realizing there was nothing more to say. However, I've had hardly any interaction with Cameron, not even after their wedding. The grandkids came over on their own, so there was no need to go through Cameron. Still, I did try inviting her over for meals a few times, but she always declined, saying she was busy. Eventually, I realized she didn't want to dine with us and stopped asking. So, I wasn't sure how much to trust Cameron's words. Just as I was about to give up and hang up, I heard a beloved grandchild's voice on the other end. "Mom, who are you on the phone with? Is it Grandma? Can I talk?" "Be quiet. Go away," Cameron hissed, trying to muffle the receiver, but I could hear everything. Then I heard Liam's voice. "A call from Mom? That's rare. What does she want with you?" I was astonished. Cameron had just said Liam wasn't home. Confused by hearing my son's voice from the background, Cameron panicked. "Hey, you, go over there!" She sounded frantic, and then the call abruptly ended. It was clear Cameron hung up abruptly. What was that about? Liam was home, yet Cameron said he wasn't. And why were the grandkids refusing to talk to me? Surely a phone call shouldn't be a problem. The more I thought about it, the more Cameron seemed like an enigma. If we had interacted more, perhaps I could have understood her intentions, but I hardly knew her. I inevitably concluded that Cameron was deliberately keeping the grandkids from me. Maybe she feared Liam would share something unnecessary if he spoke to me. After that phone call, the grandkids didn't visit for 3 years. The eldest must be a freshman in high school by now. I had sent a watch as a graduation gift, but there was no thank you call or visit. My kind grandchildren wouldn't just ignore that. I became terrified thinking Cameron was controlling everything. Jake and I longed for our grandkids, but this August brought a turning point. On August 1st, just as I posted on Instagram and was about to start lunch, the doorbell rang. I opened the door expecting a visitor. What? Liam? And Cameron with the kids? I was stunned to see Liam, Cameron, and the grandkids all with somber faces.
"We came for the summer break. You must be bored, right, Mom?"
"Yes?" Liam said just that and burst into the house from the front door. I smelled a strong scent as we passed by each other. It was a quite strong alcohol smell. I was dismayed that he had been drinking since the morning, and at the same time I was confused as to why he wasn't at work on a weekday and instead came to our house. "Excuse us for intruding." Cameron, whom I hadn't seen in a while, entered the house following Liam, without even making eye contact with me. The grandchildren, too, with expressions as if they wanted to say something, all followed their parents, heads down. On closer inspection, all of them had lost a lot of weight since I last saw them. "What's going on, Liam?" Although I was happy to see my grandchildren, their gloomy expressions concerned me more, and I couldn't comprehend the situation. "What's all this about?" Jake, coming out of his study, was also taken aback.
"Just visiting for summer vacation. You wanted to see them, right? Be thankful."
Liam, slouching on the sofa, looked up at me with drunken eyes. "It's fine to visit, but what about your job? And if you were coming, you should have told us in advance."
"Shut up. I was busy, all right."
I realized my sensible words wouldn't get through to Liam as he raised his voice. "Grace, get us something to drink, will you? We're guests here." Cameron sounded annoyed, ordered me around. What on earth is going on? I really don't understand. I looked at the grandchildren seeking help, but they all had awkward expressions. The usual lively brightness had vanished from all of them. The eldest grandchild looked at me as if pleading for help. His eyes seemed to scream, "Help us."
We're going to take a shower. Cameron, you go first."
As Cameron headed to the shower, Liam ordered the eldest grandchild to buy alcohol. "Are you really going to make a child buy alcohol?"
"Don't meddle in other people's business.
Scarlett, go do it.
Then I'll go with her. That's all right, isn't it?
Do whatever you want.
Liam, drunk, grabbed a beer from the fridge and started drinking, seemingly uncaring as long as he got his alcohol. I followed Scarlett out. To Jake, keep an eye on the grandchildren, I requested and left the house with Scarlett. As soon as we were out, Scarlett burst into tears. Grandma, help! While comforting Scarlett, who was rubbing her nose, I asked her to tell me what had happened. Mom and Dad wouldn't let us come to Grandma's house. They threatened us, saying, "Do you know what will happen if we go? That's why we couldn't come to see you. I'm sorry." It was like that. Poor thing. It's okay. We're sorry for not knowing anything. The story Scarlett told was dreadful. 3 years ago, it turns out, Liam was fired from his job. Since then, he had been scraping by with part-time jobs, but that wasn't enough to feed a family of 9. He made the grandchildren do odd jobs to earn just enough for food, but they could only afford 1 meal a day. That's why all the grandchildren were so thin. Yet, Liam and Cameron didn't seem to have lost weight. They must have been eating well, while not feeding the children. This watch? I've always wanted to thank you. I've kept it with me all the time. It made me feel like you were protecting us. Saying this, Scarlett showed me the watch. The watch on slender Scarlett's wrist was as pristine as new. It showed how much she cherished it. Ah, how terrible. Scarlett had to endure all this. Thinking of how the grandchildren had been enduring it in front of their parents, I felt like crying. Please, Grandma, help us. Well, I'm fine, but I want to help the younger ones. I embraced gentle Scarlett's shoulder and nodded at her. Yes, I'll definitely help. Can you wait just a little longer? Okay. I immediately relayed the story I heard from Scarlett to Jake over the phone. Jake was furious. "What is this?" he exclaimed. After that, "We're in a bad situation here too. Come back quickly." Scarlett appealed to me with those words. Hearing this, Scarlett's face turned pale. Mom and Dad are doing something to my sisters again. That's terrible. Let's hurry back. After finishing the errand for Liam, we hurried back home. Upon returning, an unbelievable scene unfolded. Liam and Cameron were sitting on the sofa, greedily eating snacks and drinking alcohol. Beside them, the third grandchild was massaging Liam's shoulder and arms. The younger grandchildren were cleaning up empty cans. The second grandchild was being forced to make appetizers in the kitchen. And there stood Jake, frozen. Whenever Jake tried to move, Cameron, with a devilish face, would wave the remote control on the table in front of the youngest grandchild's eyes. "What are you doing, both of you?" I couldn't help but raise my voice in shock.
Hey, you're finally back. Took you long enough. Bring that here quickly. Liam ordered Scarlett harshly. Immediately, the eldest grandchild said yes and brought the alcohol they bought to Liam. "Grace and Jake, you guys can sleep and stay in the garden. Take care of the kids." Recognizing me, Cameron instructed with a condescending smile. "What?" Jake and I stared at Cameron, thinking we must have heard wrong. But she didn't correct her statement and just kept that unpleasant smile. The 7 grandchildren looked at Jake and me with anxious eyes. Though shocked, we ignored Cameron's words, but the subsequent actions of Liam and Cameron were terrible, with the groans of the grandchildren echoing through the room. Realizing the situation was getting worse, Jake and I discussed the next steps in the bedroom. The faces of Liam, Cameron, and the grandchildren kept coming to mind. We have no choice but to take action now. That's right. Nodding in agreement, we stood in front of Liam and Cameron, who were getting drunk. "Grace, you're still here? Your place to sleep is over there."
ordered by a drunken, foul-smelling Cameron. I looked at Jake with a serious face and said, "Shall we go back to our parents' home?" "Yeah." Leaving behind a surprised Liam, Cameron, and the dear grandchildren, we started packing our things, rushing silently back to our family home.
Grace, what's this? At least let us know if you're coming back. Jake, it's been a while. Long time no see.
We arrived at my family home to be greeted by my father Joseph, who was muttering under his breath. Despite his words, his mouth curled up in joy.
Grace's family home is always so luxurious.
Not really. Jake looked around the house impressed. Despite my modest response, my house was incredibly spacious and luxurious, something I couldn't mention to others. All thanks to my father, who at 95 years old is still an active violinist touring the world. There's hardly anyone abroad who doesn't know him. My father likes Jake, a former singer, but due to his busy schedule, they rarely meet. Today was their first meeting in years. However, what brings you two here so suddenly? Sorry, we had to return suddenly. Didn't have time.
What happened?
Well, actually, I began to tell my father about Liam, Cameron, and the grandchildren. As I spoke, my father frowned occasionally, pained by the story. It was too hard to tell, so occasionally Jake continued for me, explaining everything to my father. My grandchildren and great-grandchildren went through that. Understood. I'll do something about it. Really? Yes, but for that, Grace, you need to gather evidence of Liam and Cameron's wrongdoing. Can you do that? I understand. I'll try. After making a promise with my father, we hurried back home. I pondered how to punish Liam and Cameron. Jake, too, seemed deep in thought. We're back.
Mom, why did you come back?
Why, this is our house. Is there something you're worried about? Upon returning, the first thing I saw was the grandchildren being forced to clean the room, while Liam and Cameron lay watching TV. Cameron was glaring at the slower-moving younger grandchildren. I decided to implement the plan I had thought of on the way back, confronting Liam with a firm attitude.
This is our house now. After all, you and Dad are going back to your parents' place. We don't need you anymore. I'm fed up with the apartments.
Oh, are you perhaps behind on your rent? Is that why you're trying to take over this house? I suspected that Liam and Cameron had to come to our house because they couldn't pay their rent. Considering Liam left his job for a part-time one, it seemed impossible for him to pay the rent. He couldn't even provide proper meals for the children. It was a natural conclusion. Even though their motives were exposed, Liam and Cameron didn't flinch and sported triumphant smiles.
Yeah, we young people living here will make the house happier than you old folks.
I see. Indeed, when you put it that way, then I'll give you this house.
What?
Liam was surprised by my agreement to give up the house so easily. But in exchange, let the grandchildren go.
That's impossible. We are their parents.
That's right. Hey, you, clean properly. Sorry. Cameron yelled at Aaron, the youngest grandchild, in a frightening tone. I watched this moment, feeling unbearable, and waited for Cameron to calm down. Finally, when Cameron seemed pacified, I felt my heart racing as I spoke to Liam and Cameron. May I go to the bathroom?
Go if you want.
Thank you. I hurried to the bathroom, took up my mobile phone from my bag's pocket. In fact, I had recorded everything that just happened with the phone's camera peeking out of my bag. I posted the video on social media like usual. Stress is the root of skin problems. People who do this can never be beautiful. I'm going to fight them now. I uploaded it with a comment. Comments and reactions from thousands of my followers immediately erupted. Inside the bathroom, the post spread wildly with a storm of likes and comments like, "That's terrible." Surprised by the non-stop notifications, I clutched my phone and returned to Liam and Cameron. Something incredible has happened. Look at this.
What the hell is this?
I thrust my mobile phone screen at Liam and Cameron. They stared in astonishment at the videos showing them mistreating the children, spreading around the world. Their faces turned pale in no time. It's only a matter of time before the police come. So what will you do? Stay here?
How dare you? I'll sue you.
Do you realize that it's not us who should be sued, but you? Do you think you can get away with doing this to the children? As I confronted Liam and Cameron, they swallowed hard. The grandchildren seemed not to fully understand what was happening, but they realized we were trying to help them. Their eyes teared up, as if begging me for help. Just then, the sound of the front door opening made me turn around.
Grace, sorry I'm late. So you're the notorious parents. Hello, nice to meet you. Though the police will be here soon to say goodbye.
Seeing my father laughing cheerfully, Liam, Cameron, and the grandchildren were taken aback.
Who's this guy?
Your grandfather.
What?
Actually, Liam had never met my father, since Liam was Jake's stepchild and because of my father's work. Like Jake, he never had the chance to meet my father.
This grandpa, I've seen him on TV. He was playing the violin.
Wow, you know who I am. That's delightful.
My father, his eyes sparkling, hugged the approaching great-grandchildren and then glared at Liam and Cameron with a terrifying look.
If you don't want to get caught, leave this place now. The great-grandchildren won't be raised by the likes of you, the worst parents.
Startled by his fierce demeanor, Liam and Cameron,
damn it,
screamed and left the house. Liam and Cameron, who were intimidating towards their own children, were actually cowards with small spirits. Jake sighed, seeing his child grow up to be such a despicable person. But it wasn't our responsibility that Liam turned out this way. I could no longer think of Liam and Cameron as family. Instead, I looked at the faces of the grandchildren surrounding us and my father. All of them looked relieved that their scary parents were gone.
Grandma, Grandpa, Great-Grandpa, thank you so much for helping us.
Scarlett politely thanked us. I stroked Scarlett's head. Sorry for being late. I apologized. From now on, let's live happily together.
Yeah.
Later, the video I posted of Liam and Cameron spread rapidly, causing a stir worldwide by trending on social media. The police didn't ignore this, and Liam and Cameron were arrested for assault, now in prison. Meanwhile, Jake and I decided to move into my father's house, following his invitation. It seems he's thinking of retiring soon and wants to spend his twilight years leisurely with us. Of course, the 7 grandchildren are with us too. Jake and I were overwhelmed with joy to live with the grandchildren. My father seemed happy too, surrounded by his great-grandchildren. We, the couple, are working to adopt all 7 grandchildren. We're looking forward to becoming their real parents soon. Our old home will likely be occupied by Liam and Cameron when they get out of prison. In fact, there was still a mortgage on that house, so I secretly changed the debtor's name to Liam's. A little revenge. I hope they'll work properly and pay off the mortgage.
Grandma, your skin is so beautiful. What cosmetics do you use?
Thank you. I'll show you. Recently, Scarlett, who started showing interest in makeup, came to me. I began a cheerful conversation with my grandchild, holding the skincare products and cosmetics I collected. The other grandchildren also gathered around, listening to my stories with shining eyes. Just being able to see their smiling faces makes me happy now.
My name is Kathy. 2 years ago, I got married. and I've been living a life respecting my husband Mason's wish to enjoy our time together. Things are going well at work, and as a working mother, I'm living reasonably happily. Mason and I work at the same company. He was a junior colleague. I didn't notice it, but he was handsome and popular. When we decided to marry, everyone was surprised. I joined the company right after high school and have built a respectable position recognized for my work. So I didn't have much yearning for marriage and was often joked about for dedicating too much to my job. But Mason, this popular younger man, pursued me intensely. Though it troubled me due to our superior-subordinate relationship, I had little experience with men and ended up marrying him. Yet marrying someone I loved was a daily joy. The problem was with my in-laws. Right after getting married, my mother-in-law, Serena, was quiet and reserved, hardly speaking. She followed the anachronistic beliefs of my father-in-law, Harrison, who thought women should be modest and devoted to their families. So when I went to the family meeting at my in-laws, Harrison made me uncomfortable.
Seems like these days men are doing housework, but you're working by choice, right?
My choice? Well, as I have been at the company longer and am in a higher position than Mason, earning more, I planned to continue until we had children. But if I explained, it might seem like I was belittling Mason, so I was at a loss for words.
What? You mean you're worried because Mason's salary isn't enough? Managing the household is one of a wife's duties.
Managing the household?
Well, I've never had to trouble my wife with finances.
It's my decision. I felt anything I said would complicate things, so I just agreed. Then Harrison, as if waiting for this moment, began talking triumphantly.
Right. My son is capable enough. Since you're working because you want to, make sure it doesn't interfere with Mason's work or household duties.
He laughed heartily while Serena, diligently making tea so it wouldn't get cold, impressed me with her dedication. However, a year later, Harrison passed away from a heart condition.
Dad, how could this?
His trembling figure at the funeral was painful to see. His passing was sudden and early by today's standards. Mason was deeply grieved and lost his spirit for a while. It's a shame about Harrison's sudden passing.
Yeah, Mom has always followed Dad's words. I'm worried about her being alone.
Mason, concerned for Serena, suggested we move closer. That's true. Seeing Mason so distressed, I couldn't strongly oppose the idea. So we moved from a 30-minute train ride to a 10-minute walk to a new apartment. I thought living close to the mild-mannered Serena wouldn't cause any problems. Mason seemed relieved, so it was better than living together, I thought, and easily agreed. But after a while, Serena, no longer in Harrison's shadow, revealed her true nature. Serena, now that we're close, let me know if you need anything. I said this when I went to greet her after moving, but her response was shocking. What do you mean by anything? Do you think I'm helpless without Mason's father? No, I didn't mean. Or are you glad that noisy Harrison is gone? What a heartless daughter-in-law. Serena got angry over something I never said. She was so loud that Mason, who was in another room, rushed back.
Mom, why are you so upset? It's bad for your health.
Oh, Mason, Kathy was terrible. She said she's glad Dad is gone.
What?
Mason looked at me in disbelief, but of course I immediately shook my head vigorously in denial. Can't say it in front of Mason.
Mom, Kathy wouldn't say something like that. You're tired. Let's rest in the other room.
Mason defended me, but then took Serena to another room. I stood there, unable to do anything, until I got a message from Mason. He said Serena was still upset and asked me to go home first. Feeling helpless, I returned home. Later, after dinner and a bath, Mason came back.
Sorry about today. I know you wouldn't say that. Do you think Mom might have dementia?
I was relieved you believed me. Dementia? Maybe it's just confusion from losing Harrison. I was shocked to suspect dementia in Serena on the day we moved and felt uneasy about our life here. Since that day, my married life began to crumble slowly. Sorry about the other day. Have this, Serena said a few days later, her tone kind as before, bringing me some food. No, it's okay. You've been through a lot. How about some coffee? It's fine. I just stopped by quickly. I'll leave now. I tried to invite her in, but surprisingly, she refused. Exhausted from the unfamiliar commute and neglecting housework, I felt relieved and checked what she brought. The vegetables were wilted, the root vegetables soft and rotting. The snacks were expired or expiring that day. Mason came home late from work, looking a bit grumpy. What's wrong? Bad day at work? Since our marriage, we had been transferred to different departments. My position was unchanged, but Mason had more overtime in his new department.
No, did Mom visit today? She called upset because she couldn't come in, even though she tried so hard with her sore legs.
Irritated, I told Mason the truth while trying to hide my annoyance. I invited her in, but the things she brought were spoiled or expiring.
Why does it always seem the opposite of what she says?
I was exasperated with Mason's indifferent attitude, but didn't want to push too hard, fearing he might suspect dementia again. I dreaded the thought of him wanting to live with Serena, making our lives even harder. We ended the conversation awkwardly, but Serena kept bringing inedible things every few days. Often, she hung them on the door when I wasn't home. Sometimes birds scattered them at the entrance. Cleaning up after a tiring day was just more stress. She would call for long talks, even when I said I was busy at work. After half a year, I adapted, setting up a delivery box for Serena and replying by email instead of phone calls. But then, near the fiscal year's end, I realized I hadn't updated our bank book. It was for a savings account we planned to use for a house or children, automatically funded by my salary. Excited to see the balance, I went to update the bank book. But it only showed the last month's deposit. I hadn't withdrawn anything. Reluctantly, I knew who might have taken it. I went to update the bank book today.
Why?
Why? We should at least talk about it. It's our money, right? I confronted Mason, who came home late from overtime, at 10 p.m. in the living room.
Actually, I found out Dad had debts after the funeral. I was going to talk to you, but with the issues with Mom, it was hard. It was about half.
Half? My savings from before we married should have made it around $40,000. And now only $2,000 from last month is left, even though I contributed more.
Then, more issues came up. Dad said he never let Mom want for anything. But she never got to go buy clothes or anything, so I felt sorry and bought her some. Living on just a survivor's pension is hard.
I'm not angry about helping. I get wanting to help your parents. I'm upset you kept it a secret.
Sorry, I'm sorry.
Let's live separately, to talk things over calmly about our future.
I'm sorry.
Leaving a tearful Mason behind, I gathered my packed bags and headed to a business hotel. I disliked Mason giving away money without consulting me, but I couldn't bring myself to divorce him because I loved his kindness. I just needed time to think clearly. After leaving, I lost my appetite and felt unwell, but Mason seemed cheerful when I saw him at work. Strangely, he didn't try to contact me. Instead, I received a call from Serena. Just because you earn a lot, you blame Mason for taking a little. If you want to divorce, just do it quickly. We don't need a stingy wife like you. I was cut off after Serena said her piece, but I couldn't understand why I was being scolded for helping. I tried to tell Mason about Serena's interference, but he didn't answer his phone, even though it was his day off, remembering he once mentioned debt collectors. I worried and went to check on him at home. Just then, I saw Mason entering the house. Mason? But I couldn't bring myself to call out to him. Next to him, smiling, was a beautiful woman, Karen, close enough to look like a loving couple. Moreover, I had seen the woman before. She was the wife of our company's president, Mr. Roger. A kind man, like me in the past, dedicated his life to the company and married late, with a significant age difference with his wife. Why are you here? What's going on? I'm sorry. Serena? Though they had already entered the house, Serena suddenly appeared behind me. I followed her to a nearby cafe, a place filled with memories for us. I have something to apologize for, but it's a harsh truth for you. Do you want to leave as if nothing happened, or hear me out? Serena, speaking differently, seemed like a different person, looking at me with determined eyes. I can't pretend I didn't see anything. As I looked up at Serena, she nodded and told me everything. There must be a fact that he was having an affair. The reality was beyond my simple expectations, so unbelievable that I didn't want to accept it. I never wanted to mistreat you. I've always been controlled by Mason's father. On the day of the funeral, I thought Mason was crying, but when I looked closely, he was smiling, saying he was finally free. Serena had been acting on Mason's instructions since then. She said she couldn't bear it anymore, hoping I would escape. Despite my situation, I chose separation over divorce, showing how much I loved Mason. So she decided to end it, thinking I would call Mason if she said something terrible. She knew about Karen and predicted I wouldn't get through to Mason on the phone and would come to the house. If I hadn't, she had another plan to bring Karen out. Embarrassingly, I had acted just as Serena expected. She told me many things, but the Mason I thought I knew might never have existed. The betrayal and memories at the cafe haunted me. And the memories of the cafe and the story of the betrayal were alternating in my head. After hearing everything, I was more enraged than saddened, vowing never to forgive them. I started preparing to take back my life. Grateful to have a job and financial security, I began by gathering information and stopped a transfer to our joint account for living expenses.
Hey, I noticed this month's money wasn't deposited. There are bills to pay.
As expected, Mason, who hadn't contacted me until then, called me, sounding embarrassed and presumptuous. Strange, isn't it? Maybe there's a mistake. I have things I want to discuss, including that. You must be in trouble without the money, right? I'm busy this week, but I'll bring it next week.
Wow, really? Thanks. I'm looking forward to seeing you.
After hanging up the phone, I found myself shedding tears. I've decided this will be the last time I cry over Mason. No more tears from now on. Correct, it's next Saturday. Got it. I'll join you. I reached out to Serena, my lawyer, and others who would stand by me, waiting for the day to come. The day arrived with clear skies. With Serena and my lawyer, I headed to Mason's house, documents in hand.
Kathy, it's been a while. Thanks for coming.
Mason, opening the door with a warm smile, seemed ready to embrace me, but froze seeing Serena and a stranger. We've heard everything. This person is our lawyer. Let's talk.
Ignoring Mason's confusion and hesitation at letting us in, I sat at the dining table where we used to eat together. What do you mean heard? A lawyer? You want to divorce your beloved me? Mason approached me, a mix of annoyance and affection in his voice, which made me laugh. It's almost funny, isn't it? Saying you love me without realizing you're being deceived? Mason was taken aback by my laughter, but quickly glared at Serena. You betrayed your own son? Betrayed? I took responsibility as a mother. I was shocked to learn you'd been cheating with Karen, even before we married. Using me as a cover and for money? And when Harrison was gone, you made it easier to see Karen by pushing for a separation. Surprisingly clever. Yes, Mason had chosen me because I was older, earned more, and seemed uninterested in romance, thinking I'd be easy to manipulate. I had unknowingly married into his scheme, bearing most living expenses. Mason's salary was mostly his allowance, but we managed without kids, and I thought savings were happening automatically. Yeah, I was scared by how well it worked. What an easy woman you were. Realizing he couldn't deny it, Mason brazenly admitted everything, laughing mockingly. So, you admit to these facts. Our demands are compensation in the divorce proceedings, repayment of embezzled funds, and signing the divorce papers. But when the lawyer presented our demands, Mason's face turned bright red with anger. Compensation for the divorce trial? Staying with a boring older woman like you? I gave you the dream of a lifetime. He sneered those words mockingly. Happiness? Cheating on me? Stealing money? Letting Serena harass me? And taking away my time? Serena had always been tormented by Harrison's character, who was also irresponsible with women. She was trapped in an arranged marriage between families, unable to escape due to the times. After Harrison passed away, Serena thought she'd be free, but Mason started ordering her around, taking over Harrison's role. It seemed he wanted to shift attention to Serena to cover up his own affairs. Mason played the victim, caught between Serena and me, to subtly control me without complaint. With Harrison gone, he wanted more time with Karen. He wasn't ready to divorce me, planning to manipulate just enough to keep me around for my money. Serena was willing to stay silent for an easy life, but seeing me reminded her of her past self, and she realized she couldn't let more victims suffer. Meddling for no reason. Maybe Mom's just delusional, from dementia. Where's the proof? I was astonished that Mason was still trying to dodge responsibility. Don't worry, we have everything right here, and soon. As I said that, the doorbell rang. Perfect timing. Better go get that. Don't want to be rude. Who is it? No way. Glaring at me, Mason hurried to open the door. There stood the company president and Karen. Thank you for your hard work. Sorry to disturb you on your day off. Please come in. Ah, Kathy, you really helped us out this time. Mason, too. Seems my wife owes you a lot.
The president spoke with a laugh, but his aura was intense, clearly holding back anger. It made sense. After Mason transferred, he was working in a department assisting the president, so he interacted a lot with me since our marriage. And being younger, Mason was quite favored by him. It was a classic case of biting the hand that feeds you. When I revealed that Mason's schemes began even before our marriage, he was genuinely shocked. As we were short on chairs, I, the president, Serena, and the lawyer sat at the table, leaving Mason and Karen standing. Mason finally quieted down. I've laid out the evidence you were asking about earlier. While playing the recording of everything Serena knew, I neatly arranged photos of the two dating, detailed financial misuse, and savings records.
Involving Mr. Roger. Dragging her into this?
Everyone seemed puzzled. If the relationship predated our marriage, wasn't I the one more entangled? But Karen's words were even more shocking. It was my fault. Forgive me. It was my beauty. The lawyer beside us was struggling to hold back laughter. The president, holding his head in disbelief, sighed. I married you for your free spirit, but I never thought you'd be this foolish. Kathy is the real victim here. Just sign the divorce papers and pay what you owe. The president's calm but authoritative presence was undeniable, befitting of a major company's leader. Mason, unable to say anything further, silently agreed to the divorce terms. Mr. Roger, regarding the compensation from your wife in the divorce, I prefer it be paid by her, not you. The president, seemingly ready to handle the payment himself, gave an awkward smile. You really are an amazing woman. I'm terribly sorry. I'll respect your wishes. Let's discuss our issues at home, shall we? Us? There's nothing to discuss. Nothing changes? I said before, there won't be a second time. I'm leaving now. Wait, I can't live without you. This is the second time you've crossed the line with an employee. The president looked at Mason with pity. To him, Mason might have seemed a young man misled by Karen. As the president made his way to the door, Karen followed, pleading. Why? Was Mason thinking they'd be happy together after our divorces? It felt like watching a pathetic love drama, giving me a headache. My goal was accomplished, so I nodded at Serena and the lawyer, and we all stood up from our chairs. Just so you know, this place is in my name. I've already terminated the lease, so you'll need to leave or sign a new lease by next week to avoid illegal occupation. What? You're taking my money and now the house? She might lose her job, and now this? Even then, Mason played the victim, but I was too tired to argue. It's all the result of your actions. You can find another job, earn money. I don't know about her, but you can never return the precious time you stole from Kathy. You never apologized, but you owe Kathy an apology. Serena delivered this final blow for me. It seemed like she was reminding herself, too. Serena, it's okay. Just make sure to follow through with what you've decided. Goodbye, Mason. Afterward, I successfully divorced and retrieved all the household items I had bought for the apartment. Not wanting to see Mason again, I made a list and had the lawyer and Serena move everything out. Mason had to move since he couldn't afford the rent and didn't resist much. I didn't want any prolonged involvement, so I had Mason pay the divorce compensation in one lump sum. He had to borrow money to pay it. The president also divorced, and Karen had to borrow money to pay her share of the divorce compensation. The reason for their divorce quickly became known as Mason, and he had to leave the company. Karen, with nowhere to go, is now living with Mason in an old apartment, struggling with debt collectors. Serena also cut ties with Mason completely. She sold her in-laws' house without telling Mason and moved near mine, working in housekeeping using her skills. Whenever we meet, she apologizes first, but I'm grateful to her. If Serena had given up, my situation could have been worse. I'm wary of marriage now, but I hope to find a mutually supportive partner if the chance comes. Until then, I plan to repay the president who helped me by focusing on my career.